So if you presented your morals or what you see as moral to Nietzsche, he would do a genealogy. And then once you hear the story of the origin of your morality, it will probably undermine your confidence in it. So if you say there's no way someone can ever see killing people as moral, he would say, well, that's how indoctrinated you are in adopting moral frames, right? And fair enough, because seeing racism and slavery as wrong, it's a fairly new phenomenon looking at the history, right? What did he mean by we will have to create our own values? I assume he didn't see morality and religion interconnected in any way. He separated them totally.
Yes, no, that's another great question. So the official doctrine of religions, traditionally, right, has been that human beings are not creators of values. Instead, they are subject to values. So the official version is to say there's a god or there are gods, and they are the ones who create the values and they legislate those values. And then typically, if you have a polytheistic religion, then you'll say, well, the different gods are in competition with each other and they create different values. And so that means that human beings have a difficult task sometimes of figuring out, should I follow Zeus on this or should I be following Athena on this? Because I'm getting different conflicting value frameworks. The more monotheistic religions then want to say, no, there's one God, and so we have a more unified and hopefully internally consistent, right, set of values, so you don't have that kind of conflict. So there, what we have is just in religious form a debate between universalists and relativists over moral values. But the part that your question is interested in is to say that human beings aren't making up these values. We receive them from the gods, and fundamentally our position is as I am intellectually a subject. I don't question the gods. I accept the values and obedient to those values on the basis of them. Now, if though we start to be skeptical about the existence of any gods, then we can't adopt that story anymore. Then we have to say, well, we have all of these moral values and moral beliefs, and sometimes they seem internally consistent or to fit facts of reality. Sometimes they seem inconsistent, but where do we get them from if we aren't receiving them from gods or from a tradition that traces its way back to some original God speaking to a prophet or somewhere? And so at that point, you do have to say human beings are creative of values. So it must be that we made them up. And Nietzsche is in that tradition of saying those people who make up religions are creative, right? But they are making up a religion and a mythic understanding of gods in order to account for or give consolation or validation to their subjective psychological states. Right? So if, for example, I believe in a God from Nietzsche's perspective, who is all powerful and very angry from me and asks me 5 times or 6 times a day to fall on my face and ask him for forgiveness and to tell me what to do, right? Well, officially, I'm believing in a super powerful God who is angry, but for Nietzsche is to say, no, no, you have created that God in your own mind because you are a kind of person who likes to submit or needs to submit, and your religion is just an externalization of that. So gods are made up, religions are made up, and we create them. And then there would be an interesting analogy to what artists do. Artists have a certain psychological framework, and artists create some sort of artificial reality that they then want to lose themselves in. And then as consumers, if we like that reality, we go along with the program and lose ourselves in that artificial creation. The only difference there is that most of the time in the case of art, we recognize that we are stepping into an illusory framework and we step out of it to get on with our ordinary lives. Part of religion from Nietzsche's perspective is that people really convince themselves that they're not doing that, that they really are stepping into a real framework. So there's, from his perspective, an additional level of delusion that's going on there. Now, then the question is going to be, this is the second part of your question, how do we do that? How do we actually create values? And Nietzsche wants to say, again, that not all human beings fall into the same category here. Some people do have an active imagination and a strong will, so they are the ones who are going to be able to replace God, so to speak. I don't need a God to tell me what to do. I'm going to just make up my own values, right? Subjectively, legislate my own life in terms of those, and because he has this conflict understanding of human relations, try to legislate for other people so that other people follow my value framework. Other people he thinks are weak. They don't have much imagination, they don't have much will, but nonetheless, they do need something to believe in, so they're going to be the followers. They're going to be the ones who just, somebody else has come up with some sort of framework. It pushes their buttons in some ways psychologically, so I don't have to go through all of the effort of creating it myself and trying to impose it. I can just follow along in someone else's footsteps. So from Nietzsche's perspective, he does think values are created, right? They're not discovered in the world. So he is a subjectivist in that metaphysical sense. But that then generalizing from his sense, he thinks everything fundamentally is subjective. Now the difference, if we want to then just say on this subjectivism is, and I think Nietzsche would probably account for it this way, is to say that some people, of course, want to say there are no gods, but we do have all of these values. Where do these values come from? And their answer is to say from society, right? So it's not that I get to make up my own values and impose them on the world. Instead, I'm born into a society, and that society has pre-existing values, and I get conditioned into believing in that society's values. But of course, there are different societies that have created different values over time, so we're stuck in a kind of cultural relativistic framework. Nietzsche, I think, would not deny at all that kind of the cultural relativism is true as a descriptive fact. There are all of these different cultures out there, and they have different value frameworks and so on. Nietzsche would just be psychologically scathing about anybody who thinks that that's the proper explanation, right, for where values come from. If you think that somehow society comes up with values, he says that's just shallow. Societies don't come up with anything. Societies always are under the sway of the most active, the most charismatic of individuals. It's always some individuals who are coming up with these values. It's just that the vast majority of people in society are herd followers. And so if you think, oh, my mommy and my daddy taught me to believe this, and everybody that I run into in church believes the same sort of thing, therefore society has created values. That's just to say that you are kind of a passive, weak-minded person who just lets other people legislate for you. The more active-minded person is going to say, my mom and dad, they might be fine people, but chances are very good that they're like 99% of all other moms and dads. They're just following the herd as well. And so if I'm going to be my own self, if I have some strong will, at some point I'm going to question my mom and dad. I will rebel against my mom and dad. I'm going to not only move out of the house, so to speak, and become independent, but I'm going to move out of their intellectual framework and start thinking for myself, right? Or if I go to church or whatever, I look around my neighborhood and I see just a whole bunch of very ordinary people. Why would I conform to their way of thinking about the world? They're not special at all. The only kind of people who worries about what their neighbors think is already a weak-minded kind of person in the first place. So it's then fundamentally a decision of whether you are going to create your own values or whether you are going to be a herd follower of values that some other individuals have created.